Thank you very much. And for one more time, this is behind the scenes of the new foundations of vision rehabilitation therapy. So let's go through what we'll be doing today. We'll have our introductions of our authors. Well, we'll talk about our objectives. We'll have the behind the scenes presentation and our wrap up. This is for 1 CEU credit. Please make sure you place your questions in the chat as we go. And let me go through that. And we wanted to introduce an APH product very briefly before we got started. And that is our finger walks. You may have seen a webinar on this recently. It's a quota eligible product, $139. It's all about Labyrinth. It is a free matter eligible product. You can be shipped that way as well. You see the catalog number there, aph.org, or customer service for more questions on that product. Our presenters, first is Helen Lee from Western Michigan, an associate professor, blindness and low vision studies. And Jennifer Ottowitz from the Hadley School for the Blind, certified low vision therapist. I have a few objectives to look at today. We're going to describe the textbook's philosophical content, describe the author rationale for selecting chapter content, and finally, identify 3 ways book content expanded from the previous edition. And with that, we will now turn this over to Jennifer and Helen.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Helen.
And before we get started jumping in to talk about the textbook, we first wanted to talk a little bit about what a vision rehabilitation therapist does. And sometimes we do accidentally get called vocational rehabilitation therapists, but our title is vision rehabilitation therapists. And we provide instruction in alternative and adaptive techniques to enable people who are blind or visually impaired to live meaningful and productive lives as contributing members of their family and communities. We instruct in areas including braille and other communication skills, in access to information, activities of daily living, including home and personal management, and recreational skills. So we are a lot different than vision therapy. We traditionally work with adults, but we do also work with transition-aged and younger students as well. And we've been around for well over a century, starting out as home teachers of the blind, evolving to rehabilitation teachers, and now to vision rehabilitation therapists. And university training programs in our field have been around since the 1960s and continue until today. So now that you know a little bit about what we do, we would like to start talking about our new textbook. And we did want to share a little bit of the background related to the process of writing the book with you. We thought we would start by talking about why a new textbook was needed. Our first and most recent textbook was published in 1996. It was titled Foundations of Rehabilitation Teaching and was written by Dr. Sue and Paul Ponchilla. And it really has been a cornerstone in our field. But if you think about it, a lot has changed since 1996. There's new terminology, new professional titles have been introduced, and technology has played a dramatic role in how we live, play, work, and access information. Technology's also had a tremendous impact on how skills are taught and even which adaptations are the most effective. And it was for these reasons that we knew an update was needed. We also wanted the textbook to include more updated references and for it to be a more updated reference because it is a primary source from which exam questions are written for our certification exam. Now, some people have asked, well, why change the title? It was Foundations of Rehabilitation Teaching. Now it's Foundations of Vision Rehabilitation Therapy. So we wanted to share a little bit about our history. In the year 2000, the Academy for Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals, I got it out, ACVREP, was created and took over certifying vision professionals. And at that time, our service mark was RTC, Rehabilitation Teachers Certified. But it was discovered that that service mark was already copyrighted. So we needed a new title. And ACVREP reached out to stakeholders in the field to get ideas for titles. They narrowed it down and decided on vision rehabilitation therapy. And some of the criteria that was used, they wanted the name to identify clearly the population that we worked with. And so the word vision was chosen because not only do we work with people who are blind, but we also work with people who have low vision as well. And we did want to say that we never have had the philosophy that blindness is something to be avoided. We do work with people with all levels of visual impairment to help them maximize their functioning and independence through the use of both visual and non-visual skills. ACVREP also was forward thinking and wanted to use the word therapy to help put us in a better position to someday be be eligible for third-party reimbursement through Medicare. And this would serve as an additional funding source for us because currently our services are primarily funded by private, state, and federal grants. And we do also consider ourselves a bit of a hybrid between the educational and medical models. We do rehabilitation in that we provide adaptive strategies that restore functioning, but we also educate in skills that promote self-sufficiency through strategies and problem solving in real-world settings. Now, another reason that we wanted to update the textbook was we wanted the content to better align with the current body of knowledge and scope of practice identified by ACVREP because the book really does help people prepare for certification. And now we have a question for all of you. We wanted to know if you've ever written a chapter for a textbook or publish an article. And I'll turn it over to Leanne to talk about our poll.
So I have put up a poll question. If you can't access it, just feel free to access the chat and tell us, have you ever written a chapter for a textbook or a journal article? You can either choose yes or no. Which is it? Yes, you have, or no, you have not. And those numbers are coming in right now. We're getting close to a good portion of you. Oh, it's still coming in. And I am going to end the poll and share those results with you. So the results state the answer is a majority no. 78% of your audience have never written a chapter for a textbook or a journal. 22% yes.
And thank you so much for sharing. That's what we anticipated. I will say that Helen is in the group who had previous experience writing before this project. I was in the group with you who had not had previous experience. And so we thought it would be fun to just share with all of you a little bit about the overall process in writing the book, not to intimidate anybody from giving this a try, but just to let you know, give you some insights into the realistic timelines and what it takes. And being a new person to this, I found the whole process fascinating. There were times that it was maybe more involved and a little lengthier than I anticipated initially, but it was all for good reason. And so just to, again, fill you in on how it worked for us was in 2017, AFB Press began talking to leaders in the field about what updates and content changes might be needed from the previous book. And in September of 2017, they approached Helen and myself, and we signed on to be co-editors. We then began thinking of and inviting authors to join us because we definitely wanted multiple voices as part of the textbook. And we sought people who had expertise in particular areas, had good writing skills, and who we thought would be able to meet deadlines in the midst of all the other many responsibilities and commitments that they had. And so in November, the authors were confirmed and they began writing their chapters in late 2017, early 2018. And once we received the first drafts, Helen and I reviewed them, and they were then sent to peer review. AFB had identified peer reviewers, and we are so thankful for their valuable efforts too, because they provided really helpful feedback. And then those comments were taken back to the authors who worked on revisions. In the summer of 2018, the project was transferred from AFB Press to APH Press. And APH Press was just getting started, so they took time to get established and get familiar with all the many projects they were involved with, including ours. And so it was in the fall that we began working with the executive editor, and he got to review the transcripts, the manuscripts, I mean, and was able to give his comments and feedback. That was taken back to Helen and I and the authors, more revisions, second round reviews, more revisions and edits. And then in early 2020, we got to the copywriting stage where copy editors looked at the book and made additional edits. And then after that, it went into typesetting. And one of the most exciting parts of the project was to review first proofs. And that's the first time that we got to see the book as a whole. And it was just so exciting. And a couple last minute tweaks were made. We got to review second proofs, and here we are today. So that's just a little bit about the process. Now I'd like to turn it over to Helen to share a little bit about the philosophy and our approach to writing the book.
So the original textbook by Ponchilla and Ponchilla remained the only educational textbook for personnel preparation programs until now. The new VRT textbook retains their humanistic approach to service delivery because we are people first, right? And provides the reader with instructional strategies and the logic behind them. The textbook also draws from literature and research-based findings and combines this with current best practices from our field. However, there are a couple ways that this current textbook differs from the original text. First, it's been almost 25 years since the publication of the first textbook, and our profession has matured. And this textbook incorporates the growing body of knowledge and updated information across skills domain. Aside from state, federal, nonprofit agencies, VRTs can now be found in clinical settings, for-profit organizations, educational settings, and in the workplace environment. As it relates to training, the 21st century VRT must develop instructional strategies for technological innovations that have appeared across all domains of daily living. So we aren't teaching technology as an isolated skill set because it is so pervasive in our lives that discussion has been at our university about offering technology training and then talking about how they would apply across the skill sets. So we're now teaching skills related to digital literacy, to apps and mobile devices, crowdsourcing, and artificial intelligence. So that is so different than what it was since the first textbook was published. The second way that this textbook differs from the first is that it presents perspectives from multiple subject matter experts. Instead of Ponchilla and Ponchilla, it's Lee, Ottowitz, McMahon, Abbott, Connors, Fugate, Smith, and you get the idea. But the current textbook contains best practices in our field. that is, strategies that have been proven most effective over time by seasoned VRTs. And the contribution from the different authors provides a scholarly perspective as well as the practical how-to approach to serving our population. During the review process of each chapter, it was apparent to Jennifer and I that our authors were dedicated professionals and shared passion for our field and the people we serve. The writing of this book required an enormous amount of time and energy, and it was a labor of love because all authors made time to complete their first draft in less than a year while they were working full-time jobs and had family with responsibilities. So let's look at the new textbook. Also expanded content to include more about working with a transition age client. We also address our clients that have multiple disabilities. We talk about the impact of the new legislation, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that was signed into law in 2015 by then President Obama. We talk about participating as a multidisciplinary team in serving our clients and when to consult and to refer out to folks that we work with, our colleagues in blind rehabilitation or other allied healthcare professionals. And, you know, without question, all of us can relate to the fact that technology has changed and emerged exponentially. It's just so hard to keep up because as soon as we open up that box with the new computer in it, we know that there's something less expensive and faster and better than what we have. And so it's a scramble that I think we can all relate to. And we try to address that by providing foundational skills and approach in this new textbook.
Another way that the content differs from the original book is that we wanted to include strategies for VRTs who themselves are blind or visually impaired, including ways to effectively monitor client performance and strategies for labeling, organization, and other skills to help effectively and efficiently present materials and manage the workspace. So imagine if you're teaching someone how to cut vegetables or thread a sewing needle, how can you tell what your client's doing if you're not able to see? Or if your vision requires you to use such a close working distance that it puts you literally in a dangerous position or puts you in the way of your client being able to safely perform that task. And so we do give some suggested strategies, and we were really excited to add that piece to the textbook. So Helen, why don't you share a little bit more about the layout of the book?
So aside from expanding and updating the content matter, our chapters begin with relevant scenarios that are often based on actual case studies and close with a list of practical activities that provides experiential learning and practice while promoting critical thinking in our pre-service students, our pre-service professionals. Authentic lesson plans are provided in most chapters, which I think is going to be very helpful. And suggestions are offered for the assessment process. So we have sample assessment forms as well as lesson plans. We also have resources at the end of the textbook.
And next, we wanted to give you a chance to meet the authors and just to tell you a little bit about us collectively, including Helen and myself. There were 13 authors involved in writing chapters for the book. And we have to say that we are so thankful for all of their hard work. This is a tremendous group of people with a lot of talent, and we really do owe them so much. And I want to definitely give them a shout out and thanks for, again, everything they've done. So together as a whole, our group consisted of university faculty with representation from Western Michigan, Northern Illinois University, Salus University, Hunter College, and Mississippi State University. And in their roles, they work as researchers, clinical supervisors, and educators. Our group of authors also contained people who are direct service providers and who have worked in both center-based and itinerant settings, as well as for private, state, and federal agencies. So we felt we had a nice broad array of experiences to draw from. In terms of years of experience, we ranged from 8 years in the field to well over 40. And in terms of professional credentials, not only did our authors have certification and experience in the field of vision rehabilitation therapy, but many of them also had degrees and experience working as teachers of the visually impaired, and somehow additional certification in areas like orientation and mobility, low vision therapy, the new Certified Assistive Technology and Information Specialist certification, and rehabilitation counseling. So again, we felt like we had a really nice array of talent and experience to draw from. So next we'd like to introduce the individual authors and talk a little bit about the chapters they were involved with writing. So the first person we'd like to introduce you to is Dr. John McMahon. And John, together with the next person we'll introduce to you, co-wrote our first 2 chapters. And the first chapter was the evolution from home teacher to vision rehabilitation therapist, which talks about the history of our profession. And then the second chapter was psychosocial considerations.
We asked each author to submit a couple of photos, one's a professional shot and then a photo of their choice. And we also asked them for a fun fact about themselves. So John is pictured here accepting a Distinguished Alumni Award from Western Michigan University. And a fun fact is that John likes to cook lasagna, and he has over the years opened his home to many vision rehabilitation professionals who traveled to Maine, and they would visit him and share fellowship. So he welcomes all. The only problem is now he's moving back to Michigan, so you guys don't pack your bags yet.
Next, we have Dr. Paul Ponchilla, and as I said, he worked with John on our first 2 chapters. And we did want to mention that the psychosocial considerations chapter is a separate chapter in this new textbook, which is a change from the previous book. And we did this intentionally because we recognize the importance in understanding these psychosocial considerations when working with our clients.
So a fun fact is that Paul Ponchilla was selected as one of the torchbearers to carry the Olympic flame in 1996 when the games were held in Los Angeles. And here's a photo of him running with the Olympic torch through the streets of Dearborn, Michigan.
All right. Next, we have myself, Jennifer Ottowitz, and I had the pleasure of writing the chapter on the assessment and planning processes. And this chapter talks about the different types of assessments we're involved in conducting. It also talked about writing lesson plans, behavioral objectives, and SMART goals.
So Jennifer shared a picture of a hot dog dressed up as a Milwaukee brewer. And actually, this is a human hot dog that's about 10 foot tall. Fun fact, Jennifer played trombone in a marching band in high school, which I think is pretty amazing for someone that has visual impairment.
And I also have very short arms, so it was not always the easiest. Our next author we'd like to introduce you to is BJ Lejeune. And together, BJ and I co-wrote the chapter on learning and teaching, which includes a lot of fascinating information about different learning theories, as well as practical tips for teaching.
And BJ sent us a lovely picture of herself in college. A fun fact about BJ, she once worked on a commercial fishing boat, and she also took a group of blind students hiking from the north rim of the Grand Canyon, camped overnight, and hiked back up the south rim.
Our next author is Dr. Helen Lee, and Helen wrote 2 of our chapters, the first on low vision skills and the second on keyboarding and access technology. And we do want to say that as vision rehabilitation therapists, we do not prescribe low vision devices, but we do reinforce their use in activities of daily living, communication, and recreational tasks.
And so I have a secret past as an artist. I earned a fine arts degree in 1983, and Paul Ponchilla and I, the curriculum for adapted art for visually impaired individuals, and we conducted a number of workshops. And here's a picture of me wearing my COVID-19 outfit with dust masking classes. Actually, it's to protect us against dust and working with a young student using a power tool.
Next, we have Sue Dalton. And Sue wrote 2 of our chapters, the first on handwriting and tactile drawing, and the second on leisure time pursuits.
And Sue sent us a cute baby shot with long curly hair, and she's also wearing a dress and saddle shoes. Fun fact, Sue says, for 3 years I worked for Mack Trucks. Yes, the semis with the bulldog hood ornament. As a sales clerk, bookkeeper, and at the same time, worked a few nights a week at Dirty Nellie's Irish Pub as a barmaid.
And Sue says the skills she learned in those 2 jobs are so valuable, she's still using them today. So our next 2 authors worked together on a couple of chapters. So first, let me introduce you to Polly Abbott. And Polly helped write our chapter on braille and other forms of tactile communication, as well as our chapter on independent living skills.
Polly shares a picture of herself about kindergarten-ish age jumping off of a swing. Fun fact, Polly speaks French, she sews her own clothing, and she's very passionate about braille.
And next we have Dr. Elise Connors, and Elise worked with Polly on these 2 chapters. We did want to share that our independent living skills chapter does discuss the orientation and mobility skills that are within our scope of practice to teach, including human guide and protective techniques. It does talk about when to refer to an orientation and mobility specialist, and also includes strategies for labeling and organizing, as well as shopping.
And Elise shares a really cute baby picture that looks like it's been peeled off the jar of the Gerber baby food. Fun fact, Elise is an activist for any human rights cause. She also loves knitting and enjoys her grandkids.
And next we have Steve Kelly, and Steve wrote our chapter on access to information, electronic listening, recording, and reading devices. And this chapter includes information about the digital talking book player, other digital voice recorders, OCR or optical character recognition devices, and the like.
Here's a picture that Steve shares wearing diapers. I should also add that he's a baby in the picture. A fun fact is that Steve loves the outdoors and raises goats and chickens. And he also names the goats, but draws the line at naming the hens.
Our next 2 authors worked together on a couple of our chapters. So first, we want to introduce you to Dr. Linda Fugate. And Linda helped write our chapter on adaptive food preparation, as well as our chapter on personal management skills.
And Linda shares a picture of herself as a baby with her sister. And I can't help but notice how much she still looks the same. So a fun fact about Linda is that her nickname is Susie, and she also loves to sew and is a proud grandmother.
And next we have Lachelle Smith. And as I mentioned, Lachelle worked with Linda on these 2 chapters. Our personal management skills chapter does include information and strategies for teaching grooming and hygiene skills, putting on makeup, clothing care and laundry, and medication management, including adapted diabetes self-management.
And Lachelle shares a vacation picture of herself and her husband. Looks like they're vacationing in Italy, and he looks like the actor from NCIS LA. A fun fact, Lachelle said, I once did a 23-mile sunrise bike ride down the Haleakala volcano in Maui, Hawaii to impress my husband. It was terrifying, but I lived to tell the story.
Did we mention that our authors are all very brave, not just for taking on this project, but in all aspects of life too? So next we have Paul Smith, and Paul wrote our chapter on home management, which includes strategies for teaching cleaning, as well as home maintenance and home repair.
Paul shared 2 pictures, one as a toddler and another one pictured holding a chainsaw with his protective gear. And I want to remark that Paul is visually impaired, and he is a very talented woodworker and actually does use the chainsaw. So anyway, very impressive, but don't try to do it on your own, right, boys and girls? So fun fact, Paul says, now I have bragging rights with my friends because I'm an author of a chapter in this textbook. Yes, the fence in the background of the photo is one that I built many years ago for my dog guide, Jake.
And the final author we wanted to introduce you to is Barb Hunt. And Barb wrote our chapter on managing a caseload. And this includes all the different types of documentation we keep, scheduling, working with volunteers, and community education.
And Barb sent a school photo of herself and also one of herself hiking with her dog. I would say that Barb's doing most of the work because she's carrying her dog in the photo. Fun fact, Barb has traveled the globe following the Olympic Games over the years as a devoted spectator.
And we hope that you'll agree that our authors do have quite the array of experience. You may recognize a lot of the content of the book as it relates to the expanded core curriculum. And so again, we're just very thrilled to have the chance to work with all of them. There are a couple more people that we'd like to acknowledge. They were instrumental in getting the project started, as well as getting it to the point where it is today. So first, we'd like to say a big thank you to George Abbott. George actually wrote the foreword for this new textbook. George is currently the Senior Vice President with the Seattle Lighthouse, and at the beginning of this project worked with AFB. And it was through his continued advocacy in support of the book and through his work with AFB and APH to procure funding that the project even got off the ground. And George really understood and believed in the need for the value and the importance of the textbook. And he took a chance on all of us and really believed in us and provided a lot of guidance and support along the way. And for that, we are so eternally grateful. So a big thank you to George. And then the other person we'd like to thank is Larry Murata. Larry is the executive editor of APH Press, and he took over the project midstream. And he was so kind and patient and helpful with answering all of our questions and provided a lot of guidance and support throughout the latter phases of this project as well. So thank you to Larry.
Welcome.
Now, we do realize that updating this textbook is a big milestone in helping our profession remain viable and even advance into the future. But we do also know that there are still a lot of challenges facing our field. And so now we'd like to ask all of you a question. We'd like to know, what do you think is the #1 challenge facing the field of vision rehabilitation therapy? And if you'd be so kind as to type your answers into the chat, Leanne's going to help us check out some of your answers.
Lack of research is the first one to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of knowledge. Long-term financing. Too few of us. Funding. Keeping up with technology. Limited resources. Not enough people know of this resource, especially in my small town. Lack of recognition and funding. Time in traveling to clients. Occupational therapists getting the job before I do as a VRT. Constantly changing technology. Lack of publishing and research. OTs being able to bill for similar services. Competition with OTs. Lack of instructors in the area. Not enough VRTs. Funding. Inability to address the needs of school-age children. Recruitment. Education qualifications need to be offered at a bachelor's level versus a graduate level. Time to stay current. Reminding doctors who we are and what we do. Active, meaningful research regarding poor employment outcomes for years. Keeping up with technology. Recognition by education or medical funding resources. More education regarding technology. We're a hidden profession. We are not seen working in people's homes. Not enough university programs. Need for doctoral levels of preparation. OLIB needs to be funded. Medical personnel go to OTs first. Services for K-12. Recruiting new instructors and lack of training programs. not being able to bill insurance for our services, visibility in the field, career advancement, limited information around profession paired with geared education toward adults versus children not being IEP eligible. Research, shortage of professionals. Licensure. The separation between VRTs and other therapists who are more well-known can bill insurance and are available at medical practices. Lack of low vision doctors and clinics. Too hard to get CVRT credits for training. Standardized tests. They're starting to slow down. Not seeing any new ones. There you go. Back to you, Jennifer.
Okay, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Helen.
Okay, so a lot of you folks really nailed a lot of the issues on the head, and you actually came up with all the ones that Jennifer and I identified for this particular slide, but there were just more challenges that you folks brought up that we don't have time to address, but I think that it would be worth for future conferences to have a panel discussion about some of the issues, especially the time and money one. You know, that could be a whole topic by itself and would require brainstorming together. So what Jennifer and I came up with is that we need to, as VRTs, continue to be viable in a world that is changing rapidly. And we need to present our role in the context of our current lives and events by educating others about the services that we provide, because not enough people know what we do, and the fact that I think that we are very responsive in our profession because we continue to evolve and change with the demand out in the field. And the most current, obviously, is this pandemic and having to deal with technology and communication issues, right? I am sure that a lot of you out there in the audience can relate to meeting healthcare providers, rehab counselors, teachers, and in general, individuals in the public who meet you and don't know the type of services and training that we provide. And actually, how many of you have got the response that they think that all we do is teach braille, provide cane training, and sign language, right? Yikes. So we need to be more visible, folks. I think one of the things we can do is start thinking about presenting at conferences outside of our professional niche, like those targeting healthcare professionals, educators, gerontology conferences, to name a few, because we tend to present at our own conference. We tend to publish in our own special journal for visual impairment publication, and who reads those but people who already know what we do. Another way of marketing our profession is to develop a professional website that can be accessed through links from other sites related to healthcare, not just our professional sites. And VRTs must continue to develop and grow as the nature of our consumer base broadens. So with the passage of the WIOA legislation, that is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, we are finding ourselves providing assessment and training in employment settings. In addition to our current way of life, it brings with, I think, the problem of our consumers being dependent on technology. And when that happens, they often lack the training, so they become quickly frustrated. So we need to step in and we need to learn how to use those technologies, as we always have, but there's just more for us to learn and to know. And as we are in this position, we need to update our knowledge base. So we can rely on conferences, webinars, and other continuing education opportunities to stay up to date. Now, of course, that does not address the time and money issue. So again, we need to brainstorm and see how that can be equitable. But I think we would all agree that our employers aren't going to say, "Oh, Jennifer, you want a day or two off to learn this technology?" Sure, because it just doesn't happen, right, folks? One of the significant changes is the emergence of these mobile technologies. And within that is the way that we communicate. So we no longer, right, VRTs provide 1 or 2 sessions in phone dialing. You remember when we used to say, here's the home key, and we spend 2 hours having our consumer practice dialing. We are now teaching the various functions of mobile devices. And I call my phone digital Swiss Army knife, because within that device, we are teaching our consumers how to utilize weather apps. We are using it for social media, wayfinding, note-taking, optical character recognition, scheduling, calculator, and we can go on and on. And also we have to remember that it's still a phone, right? I call mine also my cognitive prosthesis. All right, so that's just one of the ways that I think the world has changed. I think we can come up with so many different ways and why this textbook is different than the first one. We do address these things in the textbook in a real foundational way, so that, because we know technology changes, but I hope that you'll find the information in the textbook helpful, because we deal with foundational skills that you would build on and concepts and sample lesson plans. Let's go to the recruitment piece. We have always had trouble with numbers in our field. We are a very, very small field. Jennifer, how many CVRTs are there?
As of last week, we had 677 certified vision rehabilitation therapists, and we know there are many more practicing under different job titles and doing the work of a VRT, but yeah, 677 certified.
Okay, and so there are more VRTs out there that aren't certified. Perhaps their certification ran out or their employer does not require it, but it's still a very small number. So we need to start recruiting more. I know we talk about recruitment, but we always talk about it. I think that we could do more through marketing our profession, engaging in job fairs, and volunteering to mentor interns through collaboration with university programs. We need to find placements for our students. And in the current model of education, we're talking about online students that need to find places closer to their home. We need more publication and research. A number of you had said this. So as a profession, we don't publish enough. And this was evident during the item writing process that we went through during the VRT certification exam. Each question needs to be referenced, and some of the questions were retired because our current best practices were not published. You don't have to write about research, and you don't have to conduct research to publish, folks. You can contribute by contributing to the From the Field section of our professional JVIB journal, the Journal for Visual Impairment and Blindness, by sharing instructional strategies that you found helpful with your consumer, doing a product review. A number of you folks out there present at conferences. You can write up your conference and submit it for publication. There's also potential to expand and update this VRT textbook through possible supplemental publications, because we know that technology evolves, it changes, it emerges, and we are responsive and we change our instructional strategies or adapt them. And those could be things that could be published in the future. Also, participate in research opportunities by collaborating with university faculty. Agree to help collect data or disseminate surveys. Actually, filling out surveys is problematic for folks that conduct research. Often it's really hard to get enough respondents. So if you get a survey from a professional organization, from a blind rehab specialist who happens to be involved in academia, fill the thing out. We need feedback and participation. Jennifer, do you have anything else?
Sure. Well, just to address a couple of comments that came in, the good news is that we do now have a bachelor's degree program in vision rehabilitation therapy at Northern Illinois University. And we definitely hope all of you are taking advantage of getting continuing ed credit through ACVREP from attending this webinar, as well as all the many wonderful webinars that APH is offering. So there are opportunities to gain those CE credits that you do need. Just to reiterate what Helen said about publishing, we do hope that this book is the springboard for many new publications. As she mentioned, it provides a foundation of skills, and we know that a lot of the content, there's so much more that could be said and expanded upon, and we hope that you will be encouraged to actually publish. It seemed like such an intimidating idea at first. And I would think that some of our authors who had less experiences with publishing might agree with me, but it is such a truly rewarding process. Once you've gone through it, you learn so much, and there's so much guidance and support out there. In terms of recruitment, we do also want to increase the diversity within our field. So we definitely want to look at reaching out to diverse populations with all of our marketing efforts. And Helen and I truly do feel that even though these are challenges facing our field, more importantly, they're also opportunities for us. And so with that, I think we're going to turn it over, Leanne, to you and ask if folks in the audience have any questions or comments they'd like to share.
So if you type it in the chat, I'll relay it to your presenters. So you can type it in. If you are having problems accessing the chat, you can raise your hand. It is easier for us to put them in the chat though. So one of the big questions, Larry, if you would respond, our press editor is here, is when is the book coming out? When will it be available? Larry, can you speak that for some of our people who don't access the chat?
I will. We had every intention of having it ready today. Well, I'm going to say ready. That doesn't mean like we still are writing the book. The book is all ready to go. We are just getting some details worked out with pricing, with inventory. So I expect that to happen within the next few days. So another thing I wanted to add, we've had an issue with people ordering print books. The delays because of COVID have gotten very long. So what we're doing now, if you order a print version of the book from us, we're going to give you the ebook free for the time being, because that way you don't have to wait 4 weeks to get your print book, so you can actually start working in time for class. And I saw one question there about the formats, which I'll just address quickly. We do the ebooks in EPUB, and we also do them in MOBI format. So EPUB is the format that's used with most e-readers. MOBI is the one that's specifically used for the Amazon Kindle. So if you have a Kindle and you want to get the MOBI file, if you don't, then you probably can use an EPUB file. So
Larry, one more question. Is it available on with federal quota dollars?
No, not yet. Right now, the best way I can answer that question is, in order to have things available for quota, we have to meet certain requirements in the very beginning of a project. When this project began, that wasn't even on the table with AFB, who started the project. So no, we're not able to do that, but that is something we are looking in for future releases.
Okay. We've had, right now it's still just about the book, so I think we've answered all of those. We have one person asking if APH would possibly facilitate a chapter-by-chapter professional book club. So I guess that's something we could look into about the book. Can you read the book on a PC, on a personal computer? Yeah. With ebook? Yes.
Yeah. If you want to read it on a PC, you would probably want to get the EPUB file. Yeah, and it's readable. So that's how I read it. So it works for me that way. So
Jennifer or Helen, could you give an overview of each chapter, something beyond the title? I think some of that you did, but maybe a little bit more they're looking for.
Sure. And let me just say, I am a screen reader user, and everything I've was reviewed was totally accessible too. So I'm sure the EPUB version will be just great. So chapter 1 would be the evolution from home teaching to vision rehabilitation therapy. I mean, it truly is the history of our profession. So talking about our early days back in the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, evolving through today, including our title changes. We also talk about the most recent research by Dr. Elise Connors et al., who researched the role of the vision rehabilitation therapist and how that's changed. So and again, I don't, not sure how much overview is warranted, but that gives you a taste. Psychosocial considerations is the next chapter, and that addresses the process of adjusting to vision loss. So some of you may be familiar with the stages identified by Dean Tuttle, the stages of adjusting to vision loss. We also talk about stages identified by Livna, and the idea of the process of emotional adjustment that people go through when they lose vision as, children, young adults, and older adults. All right. So, and that truly has an impact on how well they do in rehabilitation services, their motivation level, and just their overall performance. Sometimes we have to just wait till the timing is right. We can plant the seed, and that's so important too, but the person may not quite be ready. And so kind of learning how to present just enough so that we don't overwhelm, but we let them know that we're here whenever they're there ready for us.
Jennifer, are there any assessment tools in the areas of psychosocial mentioned?
I believe so, but we don't have a sample assessment as part of that chapter, but we do have definite things to consider. And I know that the authors would be more than happy to talk with anybody about specific tools as well.
Okay.
And then our next chapter, as I mentioned, was assessment and planning processes. And again, this talks about the assessment interview, comprehensive vision assessment, all the different components of those. We talk about the plans we're involved with writing. As VRTs, we don't write an IPE, individual plan of employment, but we may be included as one of the services. If we're helping related to expanded core curriculum, again, our services could potentially be part of an IEP as well. But we do talk about writing lesson plans and how to write an effective lesson plan, and how to write behavioral objectives and SMART goals. In the learning and teaching chapter, we do again talk about learning theories and how understanding those theories can affect someone's as they're learning new skills. As a person who's now visually impaired, knowing that a lot of our clients that we work with have an adventitious loss, but again, we do certainly work with people with congenital vision loss as well. And then the teaching tips include techniques for demonstration, presenting material, the pace of instruction, a little bit about scheduling. That's important if you're working on a cooking lesson that you may need more than 1 hour, but knowing how much information to cram into one lesson so you're not overwhelming the client, those types of things.
Are lesson plans included?
We do have some sample lesson plans, yes.
Okay.
As well as some sample assessment reports. Then our next chapter would be low vision skills. And Helen, and feel free to jump in at any time, but our low vision skills talks about, again, just a background on understanding magnification, understanding the different types of low vision devices and their use in, again, communication, activities of daily living, and recreation tasks.
It basically helps guide the practitioner through being familiar with devices that your client comes home with, and to understand principally what specific devices are used for in terms of being task specific. There are also suggestions for visual skills training, and we do refer our readers to other textbooks and literature to find out more information, because part of our challenge was to find current literature, and really update the original textbook. The original textbook was written when there just wasn't much publication. So you'll see a lot of references to cross disciplines, and some of the chapters really do a good job of bringing in the most recent publications regarding that topic or point within the chapters.
Next, we had our handwriting and tactile drawing chapter, and Sue did a wonderful job of presenting the different types of adaptations that we introduce in terms of handwriting, as well as the importance of teaching handwriting, even to someone who's congenitally visually impaired, as well as teaching strategies for reading tactile drawings, when a tactile drawing might be appropriate if you're working with adults. So the next chapter was our braille and other forms of tactile communication. That's fairly self-explanatory, but it does talk a little bit about the history of braille, assessments when you're working with clients related to whether or not braille will be an effective means of communication for them. It mentions different strategies for teaching braille reading skills as well as braille writing skills, and even the use of electronic note-taking devices. Then we moved into our keyboarding and access technology chapter. And Helen, do you want to share a little bit about that?
You guys got 1 minute.
Okay, we'll make it quick. Okay, I'll just go ahead. But yeah. access, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'll just try to touch on the electronic listening and reading I mentioned previously. Cooking, pretty self-explanatory with personal management. Independent living skills, as I mentioned, includes some indoor O&M skills, shopping, labeling, and organization. Home management, personal management, and of course, managing a caseload. So if anyone is interested in more detailed information, you're welcome to contact us. And I believe our contact information was presented with the invite to attend this webinar.
Well, I have to thank you. I know we are out of time. There are emails both for Jennifer and for Helen if you have further questions. Larry Murata is also available if you have questions, and look very soon for this to appear on our website and available for you. So again, Jennifer and Helen, I just have to say thank you. I deeply appreciate it and can't wait to see the book.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity for sharing.
Thank you, and we hope you all enjoy the book, and please share any feedback you have with us.